So if you hadn't heard enough of me already today, I'm back. I want to kick off our time now with asking you a question. Have you ever had one of those moments where you wish you could go back and do something differently? Maybe go back and fix something. I had one of those moments quite a few years ago in a previous job that I was in, and I'd been sent an email from one of my colleagues. And in this email, my colleague had asked me to do something that she really should have done herself. And I was a little bit annoyed about it, to be honest. So I sent that email to one of my other colleagues and told them exactly what I thought. Apart from I hadn't forwarded the email to someone else, I'd pressed reply. So the person who'd sent me the email got the torrent of abuse that I now just said about them. And in that moment, I wanted the earth to swallow me up. Before the days where I realised that you could recall an email. And it was a big regret that I had to face head on with this person. And maybe for you, you've got something like that, just a moment in time you wish you did differently. Or maybe it's a whole period of life. Maybe there was job decisions that you made that you really wish you hadn't. Maybe it was relationship decisions you made that actually served you no good purpose. Perhaps it's something you said and you wish you could have taken it back. Maybe it's a friendship that ended badly, where once there was laughter between you, there is now silence. Perhaps you walked away from someone who needed you when they needed you the most, or ignored advice that could have saved you a lot of heartache. It could have been that you stayed silent when you should have spoken up, or spoken up when you should have stayed silent. And it might be your big moment of regret for you, it may be something that no one else knows about, something that still haunts you maybe years later. When things are quiet in the middle of the night, they're the thoughts that creep into your mind. And you think, if only I had, or what did I do that for? Why did I? What if I'd just done? And you can fill in your blank for yourself. We all carry those moments, that ache for a rewind button, a chance to redo or undo, or to go back and make it right. But we can't. And that can be hard to live with. For some of us, it may just be a passing thought, but for others of us, it's a heavy weight that we carry around with us like a burden, like a shadow on our backs. And even when things feel fine on the outside, you know inside you're still living under that label of that regret or that shame that you committed years before. Perhaps it's even formed your identity of who you are today. And over this last month, if you've been with us or if you've caught up online, we have been looking at this series, Trading Places, where we have seen that God, in a way that only He can, steps down into our messes and trades places with us. And that's where today we find today's story. And we find it about one of Jesus' closest friends, a guy called Peter. Peter knew what it was to mess up, and mess up badly. He knew what it was to carry regret. He could wish more than anything to go back and maybe do something differently. But what we'll find is Jesus, in the way that only Jesus does, He steps into that and He trades places. And I think if you've been around the last few weeks, we've realized that maybe Jesus trades places with us more commonly than maybe we've realized before. So as we look at what He did for Peter in his moment of regret, we'll then see what happens next. And I think maybe one of the most beautiful, hope-filled moments in the Bible. But let me just rewind the story a little bit for you. So we're going to go back to just before Jesus was crucified on the cross, which, of course, we celebrated His resurrection last week. And just before He was crucified, Jesus had been spending a lot of time with His disciples. These 12 followers of His who were His close friends, who lived with Him, who worked with Him, who traveled with Him. And Peter was one of those disciples. But Peter wasn't just one of the 12 disciples. Peter was one of Jesus' closest friends, his kind of inner circle of friends. Now, Peter himself, he had his fair amount of airtime in the Bible. He famously was the person who walked on water, quite impressive in itself. And there's another moment that the Bible records for us where Peter had this amazing experience and this amazing moment. He had a front row seat to something quite supernatural. Now, the Bible calls it the Transfiguration. Now, that's just a fancy word for the moment when Jesus' appearance was changed or became transformed in a way that then revealed Jesus' glory. And what happened was Jesus had taken Peter, James, and John, his three closest friends, up a mountain to pray. And while they were there, something amazing happened. Jesus' face began to shine like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Now, if that wasn't just weird enough, almost amazing enough, then what happened was there was these two characters, these two people who we read about in the Old Testament who lived hundreds of years earlier, called Moses and Elijah. They suddenly appear and start talking to him as well. And it was like heaven touched earth for a moment. And just in case there was any doubt, to add to the weirdness, there was a voice that came from a cloud. And this voice said, "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." And Peter, I can imagine, was pretty overwhelmed. He didn't fully understand what was happening and what the meaning of all this was. But he knew it was something holy, and he knew it was something big. So when we read that Peter saw the transfiguration, what he'd done is he'd seen a glimpse of Jesus in all his glory. He'd heard God's voice with his own ears. He knew who Jesus was. And that's what then makes what he's going to do even more painful. Because he hadn't just failed a friend. What Peter goes on to do is he turns his back on the Son of God. And that's a level of regret that's got to cut deep. See, Peter, the Bible tells us, was also the one who declared, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And he also said, "Even if everyone else abandons you, I never will." And he meant it. I really believe that when Peter says those things, he meant every single word. His love for Jesus ran deep. He was loyal and he was passionate. The pages of the Bible tell us that. But it turned out his courage had limits. Because the Bible goes on to tell us, it says, later that same night when Jesus had been arrested, fear hung thick in the air, maybe when everything familiar was starting to crumble and the disciples, his friends, were kind of thinking, what is going to happen now? Peter found himself standing by a charcoal fire, trying to blend into the background. And someone comes up to Peter, questioning him about Jesus and asking Peter, aren't you one of his followers? And 3 times Peter says, no. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not one of them. I swear, I don't even know him. I don't know the man. And on that 3rd time that Peter says no, just as Jesus had already predicted, there is a rooster that crows. Now, the details of this story of Peter denying Jesus is told 4 times in the Bible, in the 4 accounts of Jesus that we find in the New Testament. But one of those tellings, written by Luke, adds something a little bit extra. He adds one tiny but powerful detail. And it says this, that in that moment when Peter denies Jesus, it says, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Can you just imagine that look? Not necessarily anger or surprise, because Jesus knew that Peter was going to do it. But just that knowing, the weight that would have crushed him. The Bible says that after this, Peter went outside and wept bitterly. Not just tears of guilt, but of heartbreak, regret, shame, thinking, what on earth have I just done? He's failed the person that he says he loves the most in the moment that he needed him the most. And here's what's really wild, because Peter never got a chance to fix this before Jesus died. That failure would have sat heavy on him. We know the story, don't we? Jesus goes on to be crucified, but there was no final conversation between Peter and Jesus, no time to make it right, no closure for him. And that's just what regret does, doesn't it? It leaves us stuck in a moment that we can't change, replaying it, rewinding it, wondering how we could have been so blind. What should I have done differently? And Peter probably replayed that night over in his mind time and time again. Every word, every denial, every crackling flame of that charcoal fire. And I think today some of us know that loop too well. Maybe for you it was a mistake that just spiraled, or a slow drift that went way too far. A moment of panic that you made a decision that you very soon regretted. And we carry those regrets with us, sometimes silently, sometimes with shame. We think, you know, that's it, I've blown it. I've not only blown it, maybe relationally, I've blown it in my own life, but actually, maybe you believe that that's disqualified you from what God could do with your life. And that's how I think Peter felt, hopeless. Until the risen Jesus comes looking for him. And so we fast forward a little bit. And Peter has already denied Jesus. Jesus has been crucified, buried, and astonishingly risen. And he's appeared to the disciples a few times. But things are probably still a little bit unsettled. The dust hasn't settled. Certainly for Peter, it hasn't. There might be a tension in the air. There's an ache of some unfinished business. Because he's seen Jesus alive, but they haven't really talked. Not about that night, not about what he did. So what does Peter do? Well, he goes fishing. Now, this might sound random, but it actually makes a lot of sense. See, fishing was what Peter did before he met Jesus, before he became a follower of Jesus, before he gave up his career to follow Jesus and do what Jesus was doing. Peter fished. And I think sometimes when we feel disqualified or when we feel ashamed, we do the same things. We go back to who we were before. We retreat. We go back to the familiar. Maybe in a way of actually trying to go back to relive something and to fix it and do something differently again and hope for a different outcome. So we find Peter and some of the other disciples head out to a lake. They get into a boat and they go fishing. And they fish all night, very unsuccessfully, because they catch nothing. And just like the first time when Jesus met Peter, on a boat, fishing, where they don't catch anything, Jesus turns up at the same time. Just like before, Jesus shows up on the shore, but they don't recognize him at first. And Jesus calls out, "Hey, friends, have you not caught anything?" "No," they replied. And Jesus says, "Throw your net onto the right side of the boat," which is absolute ludicrous if you think about the sea and fish. "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." And they do. Suddenly that net is full, so full that they can't even haul it into the boat. And in that moment, something clicks for one of the disciples. John says, "It's the Lord." And what Peter does, Peter doesn't wait. Peter literally grabs his cloak, jumps over the boat, and starts swimming as hard as he can to the shore to Jesus. Not tentatively walking on water like he did the first time, but with complete abandonment, and he is going for it because he wants to get to Jesus. He's desperate for a chance to put it right. And when he gets there, Jesus has already got a fire going. And this, in the Bible, is a real beautiful detail because the fire that Jesus has got going on that shore is a charcoal fire. There are only two places in the Bible where a charcoal fire is mentioned. One is at Peter's denial, and the second is here on the shore as Jesus comes to meet Peter again. And maybe the detail of that is actually Jesus is taking him back almost to the scene of the crime and saying, "Do you know what? I'm not bringing you back here to shame you, but to redeem you. To let him face it, to let him walk through it, let him own it, but making sure that he doesn't have to carry it anymore." And Jesus doesn't start with a lecture to Peter. He doesn't say, "So, Peter, we need to talk about what you did that one night." He simply says, come and have breakfast. Because restoration starts with presence, being with someone, not punishment. Jesus feeds Peter before he addresses what he did. He welcomes him before he corrects him. Grace came first. And after breakfast, Jesus takes Peter aside, and Jesus asks Peter 3 questions, echoing the 3 denials that Peter previously did. Jesus says to him, "Simon, son of John," interestingly using his old name again, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" And each time, Peter says yes. Following that, after each time, Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." In other words, you're still called. You're still mine. I'm still yours, and you've still got a job to do. Jesus doesn't pretend the denial didn't happen, but he gives Peter the chance to face it, to walk back through it, and then to be recommissioned in the job that he's got for him. And that's what Jesus does. He does it for Peter, and he does it for us. He trades our past for his future with us. He doesn't wipe away the memory, but he rewrites its meaning. Because regret can becomes redemption. Shame can become our calling. And denial can become our restoration in Jesus. And that's the heart of the story. That's the heart of the story with Peter. But what happened by the lake with Peter isn't just about him. Because Peter's story is our story. We can't go back in time. We can't undo some of those things we've done and the choices we've made. But Jesus can meet us right where we are, in our shame, in our regret, in our failure, in our brokenness, and he invites us to trade places. He takes us our past and offers us a different future. I just want to illustrate that really practically for you. Caris, would you mind just coming up and giving me a hand? So Caris is going to represent each and every one of us. And Caris, this is your rucksack of regret. So it's quite heavy. Have you got a lot of regret? So Caris is wearing her rucksack of regret. And I think like many of us, we carry that shame and that regret with us, don't we? And it can be like a burden on our back, never too far from us. But when we invite Jesus to come in and say, do you know what, I'm going to leave this regret with Jesus, what Jesus does is he takes that regret from us, and he puts it somewhere else. But us, in our humanness, sometimes we look backwards at our regret. So Caris can be focusing solely on her regret. But when Jesus comes in, he stands in the middle and he faces towards Caris and he says, when you look back on that regret, don't see that regret, see me. I'm in place of that regret. That regret is still there, and what you did is still there. But when you look back, you may see where Jesus has been at work in that all along. The other thing Jesus does, he doesn't just stand and stay right here behind you. He puts his arm around us like he did at Peter at breakfast, and he walks forward into a future with Caris, with you, with me. And says, we're going to leave that regret behind because there's a future in front of you. Thanks, Caris. Great acting. And that's what is on offer for us today. That's what he did for Peter. And that's what he does for each of us. We see that in Peter's life. Peter went from a fisherman to ending up being a leader in the early church. All of us know what it's like to mess up, to fall short, to wish we could go back and do something differently. And we can't. But this is what Jesus does. He trades places with us. On the cross, Jesus took our sin, took our shame, our regrets, and in exchange, he offers us his forgiveness, his freedom, his future. He doesn't erase our past, he redeems it. And that changes everything. See, Peter's denial wasn't the end of his story. It was just the turning point in it. That encounter on the lake, it didn't just heal Peter's heart, which it did do that, but it launched him into the future. Peter became a key leader in the early church. He preached boldly. He healed the sick. He stood strong in the face of persecution. See, Jesus doesn't just forgive him, he reinstated him. Jesus says your failure doesn't disqualify you, it qualifies you for grace. And the same is true for us. Whatever your denial moment might look like, whatever your lake is, Jesus meets you there. And he doesn't shame you. He doesn't throw your failure back in your face. He calls you by name and invites you to breakfast. And then he gently says, let's move forward together. Not pretending it didn't happen, but transforming it into something new. And so this invitation from Jesus isn't just for Peter, it is for every single one of us. And if you're wondering this morning, okay, I hear that, but what do I now do? I want to just, in the time we've got left, give you a few suggestions of things that you can do as a result of this. Firstly, is to name the regret that you're carrying. We all have things in our past we'd rather not think about, we'd rather not talk about. But ignoring regret doesn't make it go away. It just buries it deeper, where it can drain our joy and our confidence in who God wants us to be. But Jesus invites us to bring that out into the open, not so that we can be exposed, but so that we can be healed. So maybe this week you need to just take some time, maybe with a pen and paper, just in quiet prayer, and ask, what's the one thing I wish I could undo? Is there something you've never really talked to God about? Where do you maybe still feel shame even years later? And you don't have to share this with anyone else, but naming it before God is the beginning of allowing him to trade it for something better. The second thing I think you can do is to come to the fire. Once Peter reached the shore, he found Jesus had already made a fire and prepared a way. Jesus was ready, waiting to meet his regret with welcome. What would it look like for you to respond to Jesus' invitation today to come and to eat, to stop running and to simply be with him over a meal? It's not about proving your worth or fixing anything. It's just about showing up. And so maybe you want to just take 10 minutes later today or tomorrow and just sit in prayer. Just sit and see what God might have for you. Perhaps it's about reconnecting with a church community if you feel like you've drifted away. If it'd be helpful to you, maybe to talk to a trusted friend about it all. Jesus invites you to be with him as you are, just showing up. And then the other thing, as a result of those two things, the third thing I want to urge you to do is let Jesus speak into your future. For every "do you love me" that Jesus asked Peter, and he asked a second question or gave a command to feed my sheep. He didn't just forgive Peter, he commissioned him into something else. And that's what Jesus wants to do. Once we've named our regret and we've come to Jesus, we don't stop there. We need to ask him, what do you want to do with this, God? Is there someone else I could encourage or serve because of what I've been through? Is there a next step in faith that I need to be taking? You know, Jesus often uses the parts of our own stories that we'd rather forget, the more ugly and messy parts of who we are. He often uses them to bring hope and healing to others. And you might be uniquely positioned to help someone else find their way back simply because you've been there too. So let him rewrite your story and maybe in turn rewrite the stories of others as well. So what would it look like if we stopped running from the past and started walking into a future with Jesus? We've all got lakes in our lives, the places we go when we're in regret, moments that we return to in our minds, places where we messed up, things that we wish we could undo. Peter had his lake, and so do you, so do I. But here's the incredible truth. Jesus still shows up on the shore. Jesus still shows up on the shore. He still calls out for us. He's still sat there preparing a breakfast for failures and deniers and doubters. He is ready to trade regret for restoration, your past for a future, and guilt for grace. That's what the story of Jesus is all about. And it's not that we're then perfect or not that we will never fail, but that Jesus can meet us in our worst moments and says, come, sit with me, let's begin again. So today, whether you're carrying some deep regret or a quiet shame, or maybe just a nagging feeling that you've drifted off course, Jesus is offering the same invitation to you that he offered to Peter. Come, be with me. Let me restore what feels broken. Let me rewrite the ending. You're not finished. You're not disqualified. Your past is not stronger than God's future. All you have to do is say yes to Jesus today and look at that shore because he is sat there waiting for you. Just as we kind of round up this morning, I want to pray, and I want to pray for each and every one of us. And you might find it helpful if you want to just close your eyes and simply listen, or use these words to pray this in your heart. Let me pray. Jesus, you know my story. You know the things that I wish I could undo, the words I wish I hadn't said, the choices I'd change if I could. And I bring them to you now. Every regret, every moment that I've carried in silence. Thank you that you don't turn away from my failure. Thank you that instead you come close. Help me to see you standing on the shore. Help me to hear your voice calling me back, not to shame me, but to restore me. Like Peter, I want to say, yes, Lord, I love you. So take my past and trade it for your future. Take my regret and fill it with your grace. I don't want to go back. I want to move forward with you. Give me courage to step into the life that you have for me. Amen.
Do you want to stand? We're going to sing again.